Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, one of the things that we continue to see from the Conservative Party is a multi-million-dollar game. A game in which the leader of the Conservative Party is arguably in contempt of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And I say that not lightly because at the end of the day, the self-serving interests of the Conservative Party is being put ahead of the interests of Canadians. We've seen that now for 6 weeks. The question that I have for the member opposite is, when can Canadians anticipate that the Conservative Party will start to put Canadians ahead of the self-interests of the Conservative Party? Long overdue, weeks now. When is the Conservative Party going to stop playing this multi-million-dollar contemptuous game?
The honourable member from Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I was hoping that the Parliamentary Secretary would perhaps begin with less partisanship on this being quite a solemn day with the Deputy Prime Minister now having resigned. And I'll note to him that it's not us playing politics. In fact, it's his government playing politics. And reading from that same Deputy Prime Minister's resignation letter, they know when we are working for them, and they equally know when we are focused on ourselves. She's speaking, of course, of the Liberals. I believe they are playing politics right now.
Exactly.
The honourable member from Prince George, Caribou Prince George.
We'll get it right, Mr. Speaker. It'll happen. Mr. Speaker, we're talking $440 million, 186 conflicts of interest, points of conflicts of interest. So for the Parliamentary Secretary to stand up and say what he said earlier on is, it's like the pot calling the kettle black, Mr. Speaker. But through you, I'd like to ask our honourable colleague, with the sudden departure of the Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister, what's going to happen with the fall economic statement that was supposed to be delivered this morning?
The honourable member from Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Speaker. So the member asked obviously an interesting question. It is, in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars were corruptly spent by the Green Slush Fund, by appointees of the Liberal government. Hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes that were taken away from constituents of mine and his as well, so they could be corruptly dispensed with. And we see the potential later today in the fall economic statement of potentially billions more being spent on what the Deputy Prime Minister has called election gimmicks in her own resignation letter. And Mr. Speaker, to the member, they can pick any one of these members who hasn't given a speech yet in the House to give his maiden speech.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we need to bring it back to the idea in terms of what we have been seeing over the last number of weeks. And I've argued that ultimately the Leader of the Conservative Party has been the Parliamentary Secretary and sat around the cabinet table of Stephen Harper, who is the only Prime Minister to ever be held in contempt of Parliament. Now what we see, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Conservative Party continues to thumb his nose at Canadians by refusing to get the security clearance in order to get to deal with the issue of foreign interference. That is a serious issue. The question that I have for the member opposite: what is his Leader of the Conservative Party actually hiding that's preventing him from getting the security clearance?
The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Speaker. So again, the Parliamentary Secretary on this, on the eve of the fall economic statement, is again engaging in more talking points, and they're in it for themselves. And it's not us saying it, Speaker. It is now the former Deputy Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, who suddenly resigned and shut the door. And she says in her resignation letter, they know when we are working for them, and they equally know when we are focused on ourselves. Inevitably, our time in government will come to an end. And on behalf of the residents of my riding, Speaker, that cannot come too soon.